All right, so ransomware payments, they really took a nosedive in 2024, like a 35% drop, down to just $813 million. You'd think that'd be good news, right?
Yeah, less money for the bad guys.
But is it really that simple?
Well, it's definitely interesting. I mean, on the surface, a 35% drop seems like a huge win, but I'm not so sure I'm ready to celebrate yet.
Okay, I see what you mean. What's making you hesitate?
Well, a couple of things. First, while overall payments are down, the average size of individual payments is actually going up. This kind of suggests that cyber criminals are getting more picky, focusing on higher value targets who are more likely to pay those big ransoms.
So instead of a wide net, they're going spearfishing for the big ones.
Exactly. And these big fish are often organizations in critical infrastructure, finance, and healthcare, sectors where downtime can have some serious consequences.
And we've seen some pretty scary attacks in those areas recently. Speaking of which, let's talk about healthcare. Two major breaches to discuss today, starting with Hospital Sisters Health System, HSHS. They got hit hard,
Yep.
impacting something like 883,000 individuals.
Yeah, and what's really troubling about the HSHS breach is the long tail impact. This attack actually happened way back in August 2023, but patients were still being targeted for fraud all through 2024. This really highlights the long-term consequences of these breaches and how important it is to stay vigilant even after that initial incident has been contained.
It's like a reminder that a cyber attack isn't a one-time thing.
Yeah.
The effects can keep rippling out for months or even years. And we're not just talking about financial losses. People's lives are being disrupted, their identities stolen, their trust in institutions eroded.
Absolutely. And healthcare, with its often outdated systems and sensitive data, remains a prime target. We also have Allegheny Health Network, or AHN, and University Diagnostic Medical Imaging, UDMI, reporting breaches impacting over 430,000 people combined.
So we're seeing large healthcare systems and smaller specialized providers being hit. It really drives home the point that no one is immune to these threats.
Exactly. And the potential consequences are enormous. Imagine the disruption to patient care, the loss of trust in the healthcare system, the potential for medical identity theft. It's pretty sobering.
Okay, so we've got ransomware evolving healthcare under siege. Let's shift gears for a minute and talk about another sector that's increasingly in the crosshairs: industrial giants. Two UK engineering firms, IMI and Smiths Group, have confirmed breaches, but the details are still pretty vague.
What's interesting is that neither company has reported any ransomware demands, so it makes me think that we might be dealing with something more targeted, like maybe industrial espionage or an attempt to disrupt operations.
So instead of a smash and grab, it's more like a covert op.
Exactly. And that's especially concerning because it points to a level of sophistication and planning that goes beyond your typical opportunistic cybercrime.
And given the crucial role that engineering firms play in designing and building infrastructure, the potential for disruption is huge. We're talking supply chains, essential services, even national security. Makes me think of all the talk about critical infrastructure security and the growing threat from nation-state actors.
It's a complex landscape for sure, and these attacks show how everything's connected. Cybersecurity isn't just an IT issue anymore. It's tied up with geopolitics, national security, even the fabric of our society.
All right, speaking of geopolitics and national security, let's talk about the AI arms race.
Yeah.
U.S. lawmakers have proposed the No DeepSeek on Government Devices Act, which basically bans the Chinese AI app DeepSeek from all federal devices.
That's interesting. The thinking behind the ban is to prevent potential surveillance and data collection by the Chinese government. DeepSeek's facial recognition capabilities and how it could be misused have raised some serious concerns.
So it's not just about the app itself, it's about the whole U.S.-China tech rivalry and the growing worries about data privacy and national security.
Absolutely. This is a clear sign that the battle for AI dominance is heating up, with governments all over the world trying to figure out the ethical and security implications of this technology that's changing so rapidly.
Okay, we've covered a lot of ground, from ransomware trends to healthcare breaches to the geopolitical side of AI. But there's more to unpack, and I want to make sure we have enough time to dive into some of the technical details of these stories.
I'm with you. Let's get into the nuts and bolts.
Great, but first, a quick word from our sponsor.
And we're back. Let's get deeper into the technical side of these cybersecurity events, starting with ransomware. The drop in payments is definitely something to note. But as we said before, the devil's in the details.
All right, let's unpack this. What's happening under the surface?
Well, for one thing, we're seeing ransomware groups change their tactics, moving away from that spray and pray approach, where they try to target as many victims as possible, and instead focusing on fewer, higher value targets.
So less about volume and more about precision.
Exactly. And this shift is happening for a few reasons. increased pressure from law enforcement on major ransomware gangs, better cybersecurity defenses among potential victims, and new extortion techniques.
So they're adapting to the changes,
Yeah.
finding new ways to make the most money while taking the least risk.
Precisely. And one of the most worrying trends we're seeing is the use of triple extortion tactics. So, on top of encrypting data and asking for a ransom to decrypt it, attackers are now also stealing sensitive data and threatening to release it publicly or sell it on the dark web if their demands aren't met.
Oof, that's rough.
Yeah.
So even if a company has backups and can recover their data, they're still open to this secondary extortion attempt.
Exactly. And this makes it much tougher for organizations to refuse to pay. They're facing not just losing their data, but also damage to their reputation and possible legal problems from a data breach.
This brings up a really important question. How can organizations protect themselves from these ransomware threats that are constantly changing? What are the best practices?
Well, the first line of defense is prevention. This means putting in place strong cybersecurity measures like strong passwords, multi-factor authentication, regular software updates, and good employee training programs.
So building a strong foundation and making sure everyone knows about the risks and how to avoid them.
Absolutely. But prevention is just the start. Organizations also need to be ready in case an attack does happen. This means having a solid incident response plan. Regular data backups a clear communication strategy, and a relationship with law enforcement and cybersecurity experts that's already set up.
So not just building a wall, but having a plan for if the wall gets broken through.
Exactly. And this is where things get tricky. Responding to a ransomware attack is complicated and stressful. It means making tough decisions under pressure, trying to balance getting data back quickly with the potential risks of negotiating with criminals.
It's a high-stakes game with no easy answers. And it really shows how important it is for organizations to have access to expert help when they're dealing with these kinds of threats. Speaking of experts, I'm curious about those healthcare breaches we talked about. What exactly were the vulnerabilities that were exploited in these attacks?
Good question. While the details are still coming out, it's likely that these attacks used a combination of technical vulnerabilities and human error. Healthcare systems often depend on older software and hardware, which can be hard to patch and secure. And employees who are often overworked and not well trained in cybersecurity can be tricked into clicking bad links or opening infected attachments.
So it's like the perfect storm. Technical weaknesses and human mistakes.
Sadly, yes. And that's why cybersecurity awareness training is so important. Employees need to know about the risks and how to spot potential threats. They need to understand why strong passwords and multi-factor authentication are important, and how to be careful about phishing attacks.
It's about giving employees the tools to be the first line of defense.
Exactly. And it's not just about healthcare. This is true for organizations of all sizes and in every industry.
All right, let's move on to those interesting attacks on the UK engineering firms. Any ideas about the motives and methods behind those?
It's still early, and we don't have a lot to go on, but the fact that there haven't been any ransom demands suggests that these attacks weren't about money.
So what are we looking at here? Espionage. Sabotage.
Both are possible. Engineering firms have tons of valuable intellectual property, designs, blueprints, proprietary software, which makes them prime targets for nation-state actors trying to get ahead.
So this could be state-sponsored cyber espionage, aimed at stealing sensitive information for economic or military reasons.
Exactly. And the consequences could be huge. Imagine a foreign government getting hold of the designs for critical infrastructure or military technology.
It doesn't bear thinking about. And it shows why governments and businesses need to work together to deal with these threats. Cybersecurity isn't just a national security issue anymore. It's a global one.
Couldn't agree more. We're all connected in the digital age, and the impacts of cyber attacks can be felt way beyond the original target.
All right, let's talk about the AI arms race for a minute. This proposed ban on DeepSeek on government devices clearly shows that the U.S. is taking the threat from Chinese AI seriously.
Absolutely. DeepSeek's advanced facial recognition capabilities and the potential for misuse have caused some serious worries about data privacy and national security.
And this is just one example of the growing tension between the U.S. and China in AI.
Exactly. Both countries see AI as crucial for economic and military power, and they're investing heavily in research and development. This competition is pushing things forward, but it's also creating new risks and challenges.
So it's a double-edged sword. Amazing advancements in AI,
Yeah,
but also those advancements being used for political and economic gain.
precisely. And this brings up some fundamental questions about the future of AI. How do we balance moving forward with staying safe? How do we make sure AI is used ethically and responsibly?
Big questions for sure, and we'll keep exploring them in future episodes. But for now, let's move on to our quick hit segment, where we'll cover some other important cybersecurity news from the week.
Sounds good. Let's do it.
First up, ThreatMate, a cybersecurity startup focused on attack surface management, just raised $3.2 million in funding. This shows how much investment is going into cybersecurity solutions for managed service providers and small businesses.
It's a good thing. Small businesses are often the most vulnerable to cyber attacks, and they often don't have the resources or expertise to protect themselves properly. Solutions like ThreatMate can help make things a little fairer, offering affordable and accessible cybersecurity tools.
All right, next up, some news that's not so great. Nanolock Security, a company that specialized in IoT security, has gone under because of financial problems. It's a reminder that even in a market that's booming, cybersecurity can be tough for startups.
It's a tough business, and not everyone makes it. The IoT security market is really competitive, with lots of companies fighting for a piece of the pie. Nanolock's failure is a warning, showing how important it is to have strong financials and a clear plan for the market if you want to survive.
On a brighter note, cybersecurity salaries keep going up, with director-level positions now making over $250,000 a year. This shows how much demand there is for skilled professionals in a field where there's not enough talent.
It's a good time to be looking for a job, and people with the right skills and experience can make a lot of money. This is great news for anyone thinking about a career in cybersecurity. There are tons of opportunities, and the pay is great.
And the challenges are real. Speaking of challenges, Trimble CityWorks customers were recently warned about a zero-day vulnerability in their software that's being actively exploited. This highlights how important it is to patch things on time and be proactive about security.
Zero-day vulnerabilities are a nightmare for any organization. They're unknown and unpatched flaws that attackers can use to get into systems. The Trimble CityWorks incident shows how important it is for organizations to have a solid vulnerability management program in place. This means regular software updates, vulnerability scanning, and a process for quickly putting in patches.
All right, we've covered a lot today, from the changing world of ransomware to the geopolitical side of AI to the importance of cybersecurity awareness training. It's been a whirlwind tour of cybersecurity, and I hope you found it informative.
I've really enjoyed our conversation. It's always fascinating to dig into these topics and explore how complex cybersecurity is.
And we'll continue to explore them in future episodes. But for now, let's take a quick break, and then we'll come back to talk about some of the key takeaways from today's deep dive.
And we're back, so let's recap some of the big things we've talked about today.
Sounds good. Where should we start?
Well, the ransomware situation is definitely something to think about. That drop in overall payments might seem like a good thing. But like we said, the move toward those really high-value targets and triple extortion tactics is pretty worrying.
Yeah, it just shows that cyber criminals are always adapting, finding those new ways to take advantage and, make the most money. It's a never-ending game of cat and mouse.
Exactly. And that's why it's crucial for organizations to stay ahead of the game, to put strong cybersecurity measures in place early on and be prepared for the worst.
And we saw how those worst-case scenarios can play out in healthcare, with those breaches at HSHS, AHN, and UDMI, affecting hundreds of thousands of people.
Healthcare is still a major target for these guys because of the sensitive data they have and the outdated systems they often use. And as we talked about, the impact of these breaches can be long-lasting and really damaging. It affects not just the organizations, but also the patients whose data is compromised.
Yeah, it's a big reminder that cybersecurity isn't just an IT problem. It's about patient safety, privacy, and trust.
Absolutely. And it's not just healthcare. We saw how big companies like IMI and Smith's Group are at risk too, with those weird breaches raising concerns about spying or sabotage.
Yeah, it reminds us that critical infrastructure is becoming more and more vulnerable, with the potential for disruption to supply chains, essential services, and even national security.
And those attacks on IMI and Smith Group show just how sophisticated cyber threats are getting. We're not just dealing with random criminals looking for a quick buck anymore. We're facing highly skilled adversaries, maybe even state-sponsored, who are carrying out targeted attacks with very specific goals.
That's a little scary. It really emphasizes the need for a more comprehensive and coordinated approach to cybersecurity, one that brings together governments, businesses, and individuals so we can share information, develop best practices, and build a more resilient digital world.
Absolutely agree. Cybersecurity is everyone's responsibility, and we can only really tackle these evolving threats if we work together.
Okay, let's talk about the AI arms race for a bit. That proposed ban on DeepSeek on government devices is a clear sign that the U.S. is taking the threat from Chinese AI very seriously.
It is. It shows real concerns about data privacy and national security. I mean, DeepSeek's facial recognition capabilities and the potential for misuse are real.
And this is just one example of the growing tension between the U.S. and China when it comes to AI.
Exactly. Both countries see AI as a key technology for economic and military dominance, and they're putting a lot of money into research and development. This competition is leading to rapid innovation, but it's also creating new risks and challenges.
It's a double-edged sword. Incredible advances in AI, but also the possibility of those advances being used for political and economic gain.
Precisely. And this raises some big questions about the future of AI. How do we balance innovation with security? How do we ensure that AI is used ethically and responsibly? How do we prevent AI development from becoming a zero-sum game between superpowers?
Big question.
And they're questions we'll keep struggling with as AI develops. The answers won't be simple or easy. They'll need careful thought, open discussion, and a willingness to work together across borders and disciplines.
Well said. Now, before we wrap up, I want to touch on a few of the things we talked about in our Quick Hits segment. That funding announcement from ThreatMate is a good sign. It shows that investors are seeing the growing need for cybersecurity solutions that are specifically designed for managed service providers and small businesses.
That's encouraging. Small businesses are often the most vulnerable to cyber attacks, and they often don't have the resources or the know-how to protect themselves properly. Companies like ThreatMate are helping to address that, offering innovative solutions that can level the playing field.
And the fact that Nanolock Security went under is unfortunate. But it serves as a reminder that the cybersecurity market is a tough one. Not every startup is going to make it, even if they have a great product or technology.
It's true. It's a demanding industry. And you need more than just a brilliant idea to succeed. You need strong finances, a clear plan for the market, and some luck. Nanolock's story shows the challenges that many cybersecurity companies face.
Now let's talk about those cybersecurity salaries. They're going through the roof. It's clear that there are not enough skilled professionals to meet the demand, which is driving up wages.
If you have the right skills and experience, you can earn a lot of money. If you're thinking about a career change, cybersecurity is worth looking into. The job security is fantastic, there's a lot of room for growth, and the work is intellectually stimulating.
But it's not an easy field. The threats are real, the stakes are high, and the pressure can be intense. That zero-day vulnerability in Trimble CityWorks software is a perfect example. It shows that cyber attacks can happen at any time, and that organizations need to be constantly on guard.
You're right. Cybersecurity is a 24/7 job, and it requires a commitment to continuous learning and improvement. The threats are always changing, and if you want to stay ahead, you have to be adaptable and proactive.
Well said. Okay, I think we've covered all the important points from today's news. Any final thoughts?
Just this. Cybersecurity is a journey, not a destination. It's a constant process of learning, adapting, and evolving. And it's a journey we need to take together.
I couldn't agree more. And remember, Cybersecurity HQ is here to help you along the way. That's right. Cybersecurity HQ is your one-stop shop for all things cybersecurity. We've got job postings, in-depth reports, breaking news, and a weekly newsletter that's read by over 70,000 professionals.
Yeah, it's a really valuable resource for anyone who's involved in cybersecurity, whether you're a seasoned pro or just starting out.
Absolutely. So as we wrap up today's deep dive, I want to leave you with one last thought. We've talked about ransomware, nation-state attacks, the AI arms race, all these big complex threats. But cybersecurity starts at home, with each of us taking responsibility for our own digital security.
That's so important. It's easy to feel overwhelmed by how big and complicated these cyber threats are. But there's simple things we can all do to protect ourselves.
What's one thing our listeners can do today to improve their cybersecurity?
Turn on multi-factor authentication on all your accounts. It's a small change, but it makes a huge difference. It adds that extra layer of security and makes it much harder for attackers to get into your accounts.
Great advice. It takes just a few minutes to set up, and it can really make a difference.
Absolutely. And while you're at it, think about your passwords. Are you using strong, unique passwords for everything? Maybe consider using a password manager to help you keep track of them.
Those are great practical tips. And remember, cybersecurity isn't a one-and-done thing. It's an ongoing process. Staying informed, adapting to new threats, and making sure you're doing everything you can to protect yourself and your data.
Couldn't have said it better myself. Cybersecurity is a journey, and we're all in it together.
All right, that's all for today's deep dive into the world of cybersecurity. Stay curious, stay informed, and stay safe out there.
Until next time, be well and stay vigilant.
Cybersecurity HQ, Your hub for jobs reports news and a newsletter read by 70,000 plus professionals every week.